More indictments in the Mueller probe. Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his deputy Rick Gates have been indicted for a second time, this time on new charges of tax evasion and bank fraud. Bloomberg's Greg Farrell joins us now. Greg, great to have you with us. Just explain what's going on here and perhaps what leverage this then provides the Mueller probe.
Well, this basically answers a question that was left in a lot of people's minds a few months ago when the first charges against Paul Manafort and Rick Gates came out. It was a smaller number, $18 million out of 75 laundered money. This is a much larger one. This is allegations of $30 million in money laundering, new charges of basically tax fraud and bank fraud. So I think it suggests that prosecutors worked quickly to put together the indictment a few months ago, and given an extra few months, they've been able to build new charges against Manafort and Gates.
So this isn't particularly unusual for a prosecutor to come in with a simple charge, and then as the investigation continues to then supersede it and beef it up.
In fact, the length of time Manafort had worked overseas and the amount of money that had flowed through left a number of people scratching their heads in October, like, is this all that's there? But in fact, I think they wanted to put down a marker, stake out their claim, and a superseding indictment is a normal thing in a complex case like this.
So, Greg, the sense that we're getting from this, can we read anything into this to decipher whether Manafort and Gates are the main subjects of this investigation more broadly, or if this is a part of a much larger web?
I think the latter. It's part of a larger web. I think one way to interpret this, a much heavier hammer on both of them, is if either of them, and there's been a lot of talk about Gates possibly, changing his mind and cooperating, if either of them were so inclined, this is further pressure to do that.
But it means that they haven't necessarily gotten that.
So you can interpret that at least as of now, there's no deal.
Can we gauge anything about the speed of this investigation just based on the information that we have now and the information that's been collected on these two individuals?
Well, this is a very complex case. It involves a lot of banks and individuals in the Ukraine that one presumes are not cooperating and are not providing anything. So they seem to be operating as quickly as they can with, one hand tied behind their back there. This is only one phase of the Mueller probe.
Yes.
We discussed last week the indictment of 13 Russians for their social media game, totally separate.
But it's
part of the same umbrella.
Yes.
Right. So this particular segment, which is what Mueller started off with, the Manafort Gates, has now grown much larger.
What's the timetable for an actual trial or an actual some kind of plea process?
Well, that's another, in terms of a trial, there was a trial date scheduled after the October indictments originally for like April. That's way gone. It was pushed by a few months, which is normal, and a superseding indictment will now push that even further away. So the idea of this going to trial is not a near-term thing.
And of course, as the question of collusion, which is what a lot of people wonder if this is going to build to. Nothing either in the indictments last week about the Russians interfering with the election, or this gives us any real clue as to whether something on that front is coming.
Not a real clue, but in the last few months, we've seen a couple of other filings, particularly the one earlier this week about that associate lawyer, the former Skadden Arps lawyer, who pleaded, admitted to lying.
But didn't cooperate.
And didn't cooperate, but did not cooperate. There's a little vagueness there.
Interesting.
So, we'll see how that plays out. But clearly, he was in touch with Rick Gates. And clearly, there was a subject that Rick Gates asked him to speak to someone in the Ukraine about, and he lied about that. So, it's a tantalizing hint that there might be more here down this road.